Hello, thanks for inviting me to share some insights, ideas, perspectives, and perhaps even to share some thought-provoking questions to help you get the most from this amazing event. My name is James Duez. I'm actually a recovering software engineer, but I've been working in AI for the last 17, 18 years, something like that. I say I'm a recovering software engineer because you're never truly cured. But I've been focusing on building technology companies, of which Rainbird, which is a decision intelligence platform that's powered by this new generation of explainable AI, is the fifth company that I have co-founded. I entitled my talk "The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI," and hopefully this is going to be exciting, and there'll be something new in here for you. Of course, The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI is named after The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This refers to the award-winning books by Douglas Adams. Many of my images, by the way, that I've used in this presentation were created using Midjourney, one of the leading generative AI platforms. Just to let you know, a recent US legal case has reaffirmed these images are not mine. In fact, they're not anyone's. They hang in a kind of copyright limbo. It's been considered that there isn't enough creativity in the prompts that I use to create this image for me to own it. I think this raises some really important questions about whether other sorts of generative output may also be subject to this kind of legal limbo. Anyway, this is what Midjourney thinks Douglas Adams looks like sitting in front of the great computer Deep Thought featured in his books. Now, some of you may, of course, not have read The Hitchhiker's Guide. Shame on you. It's a fantastic comedy, movie, radio play. But what was The Hitchhiker's Guide in this amazing piece of comedy? The Hitchhiker's Guide was a sort of an amazing galactic book that served as, and I quote, the standard repository for all knowledge and wisdom. Now, does that sound familiar to you? I think it sounds a little bit like the promise of ChatGPT. Now, I would have a view that ChatGPT is exceptionally clever and very useful. We're going to go into that. But I'm going to point out something that maybe other people are not focused on so much, that it actually contains neither knowledge nor wisdom. Lots of words and lots of maths, but no actual logic and no reasoning. Like most artificial intelligence, it is making predictions. And we mustn't forget that predictions are not the same on judgments. More on that soon. But let's start by talking about the impact of generative AI. Here we are, right, in a hype cycle around AI. Again, right, it's been going in these summers and winters going back to the mid-1950s. But this is thanks to the nuclear explosion that has been OpenAI's invention and the amazing marketing that's been ChatGPT. But look, this buzz is well-deserved. You can look at the numbers here. According to McKinsey, generative AI could add up to $4.4 trillion of value annually. That's clearly enormous. Now, I'm going to give you a moment to read this cartoon. It's like 10 years ago when we all wanted to build apps. What should the app do? I don't know, but we definitely need one. I think we went through a similar process with chatbots, didn't we? It's like there's an unlimited budget for AI in some organizations at least, and an overwhelming excitement and panic about to deploy it. And this has been going on in these cycles for many, many years. So, how should we see this massive explosion of ideas and innovation that's coming from organizations that are playing with these technologies? Well, look, we've got to acknowledge organizations are eager to leverage large language models, the technology that sits behind ChatGPT. So you've got ChatGPT, it's powered by GPT-4. GPT-4 is an example of a large language model, but they are struggling with limitations. It's very exciting when you're playing with it at home and talking to your kids about using it for their homework. But when you come to look at it in business, there's some limitations. And these include the tendency for it to hallucinate. Some people refer to that as just lying, right? Making errors, and the inability to explain the generated output. Now, if you're using ChatGPT to write a novel, that hallucination is functional. It's the creativity. But if you're trying to rely on it to give you advice or to make a decision, you don't want it to hallucinate, right? And it's the inability for it to explain its generated output that's part of that challenge. So I would say large language models are brilliant at enhancing the user experience or the user efficiency of experts. But we really cannot delegate decision-making to them. At least we shouldn't be delegating decision-making to them. Now, by the way, this is a different sort of hype graph. And I'd love to know whether anybody can preempt or guess what this particular graph is. But I'm going to tell you, it's NVIDIA's share price. Now, for any that are not aware, NVIDIA make the GPUs, the graphic processing units, the chips that are used in the building of these massive large language models. They computationally cost millions and millions in electricity to build. These are the models that underpin generative AI tools like ChatGPT. But what is hype? What does hype mean? Hype is actually seeing tremendous value in the future and trying to bring some of that forward in time to today. That's what hype is. Hype makes a lot of noise, but it also compels us to take rapid action. Doing nothing in this space is clearly not an option, right? A serious exploration and understanding of AI is an absolute must, not a maybe. And you're all here. So I'm guessing you're already deep into that. There is clearly massive value here. But it's interesting, isn't it? How much value? And is it what we see before us, generative AI and ChatGPT, or is it the technology that lies beneath that and some capabilities that lie beyond? Now, others, of course, are talking about this at this amazing event. The good news is that this hype is at least moving towards us having some sensible, considered conversation. But there's still also some crazy about. You just have to be aware of the noise. You may have seen this earlier this year. A key advisor to the UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has denied saying the world has 2 years to save humanity from the threat of AI. But despite this, the fictitious comment was still echoed in much of the UK media. You can see how much excitement, but also hysteria, anxiety, misunderstanding, and a little sprinkling of panic there is around the topic. A professor at MIT said to me face-to-face back in March, he said, in 5 years, the concept of expert will be dead. Now, I don't believe this, and I hope to think he was being deliberately provocative. We were locked in a room of academics in San Diego, actually the day that ChatGPT was launched with version 4 back in March. But there is naturally an underlying fear of this disruption, which I think is felt by many, especially those who work in knowledge-intensive industries. Now, some large professional service organizations that we know as Rainbow, as part of our practice, are pivoting their entire business model because of this generation of technology. They do feel threatened by it. But the irony is that whilst large language models are seen as a threat to some businesses and some business models, it also represents a jigsaw piece, the opportunity to innovate with it, particularly alongside other AI technologies, to go beyond what ChatGPT can do alone and create a new generation of, and wait for it, explainable and auditable AI, models that can encapsulate not just data, but scale knowledge. Now, it's also worth perhaps sharing that the most progressive adopters of our technology, who are focused on being able to explain the decisions these models make, have found that as a result of adopting it, they're actually delivering a more human service through the use of AI, not a less human service. And that's because their best people are being freed up to build rapport with customers and expand perhaps their advisory business. One of the biggest accounting companies in the world we did a project with, and it almost doubled the size of their pipeline because it freed senior people, not junior people, senior people, because customers could talk to Rainbird-powered knowledge services. Have you seen this quote? It's been going around for a little while now, right? It's not AI that's going to take your job, but it might be someone who knows how to use AI. It comes from Richard Baldwin. Now, we have to acknowledge this fear. This new generation of AI is going to impact some workers, some substantially, perhaps more so in professional services than any other sector. Sorry if you're an accountant or you're a lawyer, right? So moving forward, I think, does require a bit of a human and empathic approach to change. We can't deploy these technologies and ignore the impact that it's going to have on people. In fact, Gartner, big analyst firm Gartner, have been talking for a while now about how change management is actually one of the big breaks on AI. It's actually one of the things that maybe even matters most in this sort of latest frontier of digital transformation. So part of the problem in this space is that lots of people misunderstand what artificial intelligence is. And I'm sure there's definitions all over the place, but specifically, I think people misunderstand the word intelligence. AI is embedded in our culture, right? From all of the stories and science fiction movies, including Ex Machina. And this is Midjourney's impression of a scene from Ex Machina. It's not a real scene from Ex Machina. Part of the challenge with the term AI is actually its definition. Now, you may have come across this before, but I think it's worth remembering. The definition of AI is self-defeating. The term was actually coined by John McCarthy back in 1955, all those years ago. And it's broadly defined as a computer performing a task that we thought of as being intrinsically human. But can you spot what's wrong with this definition? When something works, it no longer meets the definition. If it works, it's not something that we now recognize as being intrinsically human, does it? This is known as the AI effect. And it's the reason why we don't recognize all of the AI we live with today. You don't think of your satellite navigation system as AI, but I can guarantee you, because I'm old enough, before sat-navs were common, they were considered AI, right? Chess computers were considered to be AI until eventually IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess back in September 1997. I remember seeing it. Before then, people were going, it's inconceivable that a computer can beat a human at chess. Why? It would almost like be the beginning of the end. So if you actually sort of net this off, it's almost like AI is describing everything that doesn't quite work yet, right? And that's sort of how it feels, isn't it? We've got this big cloud of AI trying to add value, and the AI that's revealed itself to add value has revealed itself to be what it always was, just the next generation of computerization. The other point I want you to recognize is that all AI that we have in use today is actually pretty narrow in its application. I'll put ChatGPT aside for a minute, but pretty much everything that we have does like a kind of a narrow task. It's why we call it artificial narrow intelligence. Narrow solutions can be applied to specific problems. And to date, it's narrow solutions that really been adding value with AI. Now, I would take the stance that artificial general intelligence is some way off, despite the fact that some would say ChatGPT can look a lot like artificial general intelligence. Yeah, you can be talking about genomics 1 minute, and then you can context switch and get it to talk about Genghis Khan the next. But it has some very significant limitations that mean it can't be delegated. We can't delegate responsibility to it to go and do the sorts of things that humans do, sorry. Right, so look, let's throw up a few definitions of AI, right? The first thing to acknowledge is the term AI itself, which I've said has been around since the 50s, is singularly unhelpful because AI is not a thing, right? It's a whole broad collection of technologies. It's always been a rolling collection of innovation trying to prove itself, okay? Now, machine learning as a term is also a very broad category, and therefore I would say is quite unhelpful. Again, it's not one thing. But we could conclude, right, that all machine learning shares some of the same attributes. It's any system that's using data to create algorithms without explicitly writing them. It's a system that's using data to create algorithms without explicitly writing those algorithms. I'm going to introduce to you another form of AI. Now, I imagine some of the older folks here may know what I'm talking about, but some of you may never have heard of symbolic AI. Right? Symbolic AI is both very old and actually it's now also very new again. But you could think of it as the opposite of machine learning in that symbolic AI has to be explicitly programmed. It works much the same way as we teach people. We can teach a machine what we know. Now, a little bit of AI history, it was all the rage in the 1980s and the 1990s. Governments put billions into symbolic AI back then. US government put $1 billion in, the Japanese fifth generation project put money in, the UK government put money in, billions went into symbolic AI. People have just forgotten that AI history. Just a little bit into what happened, right? The reason why symbolic AI is called symbolic AI is it is using symbols to specifically express knowledge, right? We can have symbols, we can join them together, and we can build logic into these models. Now, symbolic AI was kind of synonymous with conscious reasoning, conscious knowledge. And actually, there were some rebels back then that thought, oh, I wonder if we can sort of almost simulate subconscious reasoning. We could call it sub-symbolic AI. And actually what happened is as computers got more powerful, as more data became available, the pendulum swung from symbolic AI to this sub-symbolic AI. If symbolic AI is knowledge, sub-symbolic AI is kind of, how does our brain sort of biologically work in just sort of sifting through all this data, trying to find patterns. And of course, sub-symbolic AI became machine learning with all of its variants. And then we've got the current focus, which I've chosen to break out separately because of the hype, generative AI and large language models, which are the technology that underpin tools like ChatGPT. These are models that generate content, obviously, hence the name. But this category should really be in the machine learning category, right? Large language models, like the one, like GPT-4 that powers ChatGPT, is based on machine learning. Why does it matter? Why am I highlighting that with such vigor? Okay, here's another cartoon. This is an oldie, but still very relevant today, one of my favorites. Let me give you a moment to absorb it. This is your machine learning system. Yep, you pour data in, you collect the answers on the other side. What if the answers are wrong? Just keep stirring the pot until they look right. Okay, this is the challenge with machine learning. If I was to ask a machine learning model, right, could be an algorithm that's showing me a Facebook advert or an algorithm that's trying to figure out what movie I should watch next on Netflix. And I go, why did you make that prediction? Why did you send me to make that judgment, that decision? It would simply say, nah, you wouldn't understand. You don't speak my language. I can only express this mathematically. There's no logic. We're looking at data, we're finding correlations, and we're spitting them out because they're probabilistically most likely. Now, some data scientists in the room may take argument with me that machine learning models are explainable, and I'll take that fight, okay? You can see which parts of the model light up. You can create heat maps and sort of explain how they work at a macro level. I call that macro explainability. But what we really care about is micro explainability. Why did you make that decision in that circumstance, right? If I'm going to build an AI model that's going to decide whether I can borrow money from a bank, and it says no, I want to know why in my circumstances that's not possible. If we're going to delegate responsibility to AI to make decisions of consequence, we need to know why models have provided an outcome. And this has been machine learning's Achilles heel, right? Now, while many are focused on what ChatGPT and other LLMs can do to augment the work of expensive experts, which incidentally is brilliant and fine, there are some more ambitious and strategic things that we can do. I'm not going to go into depth around these, but I'll touch on them. Now, while most realize that what large language models produce cannot be entirely trusted, right? So we need an expert to interpret the results. And again, that's fine. It is adding to efficiency, but we can't delegate responsibility to them. Because like all machine learning, large language models are making predictions, and that only helps if you're the subject matter expert capable of smelling the bullshit. And forgive me, I do mean that in the technical sense. I actually asked Midjourney to create an image of a pile of bullshit, and it created an image of a pile of bulls, possibly in, whatever, anyway. But bullshit is convincing sounding nonsense that's devoid of truth. And machine learning does have a pretty established history of spitting that out from time to time, okay? So if we're going to harness the power of AI to create new digital products and services that we want to rely on, we have to trust the technology. And as I say, this is large language models, ChatGPT's Achilles heel. Why does this matter, right? Another quick history lesson. Apologies, I like history. Quick history lesson. I present to you the humble microwave. These became popular in around 1979, 1980. But when do you think they're invented? Yeah, they're invented in 1945 at the end of the Second World War. Yeah, 25 years before they were adopted. Why all that time? A large part of this was about trust. People had to trust microwaves. Governments had to trust them. Some of this delay was because regulation. Now, my grandmother, bless her, would not have a microwave in the house. My mother would have a microwave in the house, but my brothers and I weren't allowed to stand too close to it when it was cooking. You couldn't lean on the microwave. I'd still be nervous to do that today. But anyway, are you seeing a parallel? okay? Adoption of technology requires us to have trust and to some extent regulation. But I can hear some of you screaming at me, right? But large language models, ChatGPT, can be asked for an explanation and it will give me one, right? If I ask it a question, it predicts an answer, right? If I say, why did you say that? It predicts an explanation. Is that really an explanation? No, it's the prediction of an explanation. I recently spoke to a Silicon Valley venture capitalist who had made 3 investments in LLM companies and had not clocked this point. Not only can the answers look right and be wrong, or look wrong and be right, so can the explanations. And because this does not come with a chain of reasoning, there's not logic within these models, okay? There's a lot of words and maths, right? Vector embeddings and other things, right? And it's incredibly powerful, but it doesn't actually reason, not in the way we consider we reason. And because large language models are not readily interpretable, it's hard to know the difference unless you're the expert. This is why many are focusing on the day-to-day working experience of experts, not using them to automate processes because of the hallucination. Excuse me. So while predictions are useful, they're not the same as judgment. Now, I sometimes get challenged on the semantics here. Is there really a difference between a prediction and a judgment? And again, I'll take that argument, right? Predictions, I would say, are data-driven forecasts of future outcomes based on historical data, right? I can predict the weather. That's a prediction. It might rain tomorrow. Hopefully not, but maybe it will. I can think of predictions as almost like the kind of neuro part of an unfinished equation. Judgments, right, are the evaluation of a prediction based on beliefs, values, experiences, which can include regulations and rules, right? So yeah, my prediction is the weather forecast says it may rain tomorrow. My judgment is, do you know what? It's always wrong. I'm going to ignore it. That's my judgment. Yeah. So we have prediction and we have judgment, and they're clearly different things. So actually, if prediction is a kind of a data-led neuro process, and judgment we've said we can express symbolically, we might actually have 2 halves of a different equation, right? Neuro-symbolic. Going to come to that in a second. Don't wish to scare you, but we're going to talk a little bit about neuro-symbolic AI. But look, a genuinely autonomous decision should be informed by data, past data. Let's say that that's the prediction. Measured, moderated, judged by standards set by humans. That's what symbolic AI does, right? Let's call that judgment. And then we might take action on that, which is actually the decision, right? That's the decision. I decide to not take an umbrella. I'm an idiot, right? I have so many umbrellas because I decide not to take an umbrella and then have to buy one in a hurry. Maybe I should do some feedback learning and kind of reprogram myself. But anyway, any process should be subject to scrutiny and inspection if we're really to ensure that the chain of reasoning can be understood. Yes, we've made predictions based on data, but we've applied judgment. And ultimately, the bit that really matters is the decision we took, right? Explainability is central to trust. Trust is necessary, otherwise stuff just doesn't get adopted. This is why the world needs AI it can trust. Taking a quick look at this through the eyes of analyst firm Gartner, this is the hype cycle for AI. It's the latest hype cycle for AI. And if you haven't seen a hype cycle before, you have this kind of innovation trigger where these new technologies are climbing up this ramp to reach the peak of inflated expectations, okay? Then they slump down into the trough of disillusionment, and eventually we come out of the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity, which is when stuff becomes mainstream and not particularly exciting anymore, and Gartner don't bother to have it in their hype cycle, okay? Now, you can see generative AI sitting right at the top of this peak of inflated expectations. This is exactly where it should be. We're in a hype cycle, okay? There are also other AI terms that I think are really interesting on this graph. These are all the ones that we happen to work with, okay? Decision intelligence. Gartner have now said decision intelligence is really important. We'll come to that. Composite AI, the idea of using different AI technologies together. Neurosymbolic, I was hinting at that a minute ago. Can we take neural networks and symbolic AI and get those to work together? Well, actually, the AI that beat the world championship at Go, that was built by Google DeepMind, AlphaGo it was called, that was neurosymbolic, different type of neurosymbolic to what we're doing at Rainbird, but still neurosymbolic. Knowledge graphs, this representation of data in these graph models, we've extended that to include weights and certainties, and we're using that as a model. These technologies are really, really interesting. I think just looking deeper at Gartner's research, and this is a very sort of businessy focused thing, but just bear with me for a moment. We can see in this box that's sort of based over here, generative AI, which is all the rage. But look what else is in the same box. We have this decision intelligence is sitting here. Decision intelligence is the principle of thinking about how you architect decisions in a business. Start with the decision you're making and kind of work backwards from there. Decision intelligence is no less transformational in the same kind of time span to that sort of plateau of productivity we're talking about as generative AI. Yet very few people are talking about decision intelligence, right? Decision intelligence using composite methods is actually what's relevant to businesses, not just generative AI on its own. So, these other things are very important. What is decision intelligence? Well, look, it's just as impactful. We have to focus on that. It's probably a little bit beyond the scope of what we can do today. Now, look, there are various macro challenges that the world is facing, and certainly businesses are facing. All organizations rely on large numbers of people to make decisions. Yeah. Insurers have underwriters, they have claims people, banks have compliance people that manage onboarding and risks around money laundering. They have people that decide if you can borrow money, right? It's the same in all sectors, healthcare, law, tax, everywhere. The sad fact is, whilst we are brilliant as human beings, we're not very good at making consistent, high-quality decisions day in, day out. We're not very good for a number of reasons. Some of that is about bias, right? There are over 500 separately researched forms of bias that kind of get in the way of we make decisions. And of course, because machine learning is based on data and data resulted from a human process, data is full of bias. 98% of data sources are riddled with bias. So when we make machine learning models, they're riddled with bias. It's an interesting fact, actually, that, all of this machine learning, a lot of it is extracting knowledge that came from human processes where humans decided the rules of how they were going to do the task anyway. But bias gets in the way. But also there's this thing called noise. Now, noise is everything else that gets in the way of human decision-making. I could be tired. I could be hungover. I could be hot and bothered. I could be ill. There could be physically noise outside the window, perhaps a pneumatic drill, somebody digging up the road. These things will all interfere with the quality of human decision-making. And the variance, even amongst the highest performing people, typically doing the same job by the same rules. Research shows variances between 40 and 60% between one person and the next person. You don't even agree with yourself on a different day of the week. So we're not very good at making consistent decision-making. It is a vast, if sometimes hidden, cost that exists within all of our businesses. The answer to that actually is algorithms. The question then comes, what's the best way of building those algorithms, right? But we're not consistent. That's why, in a macro sense, there's this drive towards wanting to adopt AI. It combines with the financial pressure the businesses are under, the competitive pressure that's facing all organizations. It's driving the imperative to transform, not least to innovate and differentiate against the competition, to provide the digital services customers crave. So we're in this blisteringly hot AI summer, triggered by OpenAI and ChatGPT. It's been going on for a while, and it's accelerating this demand that there is to change. Now, in tackling what we've observed, whilst we're speaking to these different sort of organizations, people have really been living in two very different worlds. And I'm just going to take you through this philosophy. Many people have been living on what I call planet data, right? Now, I've talked about machine learning. We've talked about building models from data. We have actually, as a society, had a data fetish for at least 20 years. People in this area are totally focused on machine learning and what can be done with it. And look, I have to say, for good reason, this has added billions, if not trillions, to global value, right? But we know the challenges. We're in a hype cycle now around large language models. Expectations are very high. We have to recognize that generative outcomes are predictions, not judgments. We can't build models without data. Sometimes we don't have it. bias and explainability are factors. And these predictions are not easily actionable. So actually, people that live on planet data are kind of going, well, I just wish I could close this gap between all this amazing data and these insights I have and my ability to take action based on those, right? There's actually a totally different planet, which I call planet process. And whilst many people have been living on planet data, people on planet process are just trying to automate the hell out of everything they can, right? Using workflow tools and business process management, linear rules engines, right? But linear engines are too simple to automate anything complicated. Analysts have concluded that robotic process automation, some of you may be familiar with this, it's a first generation technology for automating simple tasks. They're kind of all the low-hanging fruit's been done, right? Organizations are using the technology called process mining. Well, if we've automated all the simple stuff, can we find more things to automate? Well, yes, we can, but those use cases are more complex and they don't particularly work very well in using these linear tools. They're looking to people on planet data to go, can AI help me, right? And when we try and build complex decision trees and things like this, they're very limited, they're brittle, they're expensive to maintain. So these people are going, I really wish I could extend my automation agenda further. In fact, both these sides meet in their desire to bring intelligence to the more complicated tasks, the contextual human decision-making, right? Both of them want to do this. And this field is called decision intelligence, right? You won't be able to see on the screen, but I have here the Decision Intelligence Handbook by Dr. Lorian Pratt. Rainbird's quoted in chapter 1 of this book. It's, if you're interested in the action side of AI, go buy this book. Lorian's great. She sits on our board. She's a fantastic inspiration. She's been a rebel in AI for many, many decades, right? But decision intelligence is almost the gravity that's bringing these two things together. And this is where my company, Rainbird, sits. We're using it to automate complex situational decision-making that otherwise would just have to be human, right? And our clients include Deloitte and EY and big companies that are using it to build this new generation of explainable, trusted decision services. We solve the data availability challenge. You can build these models from knowledge. You don't even need to start with data, right? You can take knowledge from documentations, policy, regulations, and just turn it into a model that's transparent, that you can understand. You can still refine that with data. You can talk to it in natural language. Feels a bit like ChatGPT, but it's explainable. This is kind of where the rest of the 21st century is going. Trust is baked in. And you know, you're probably not interested too much how we do that technically, but we use knowledge graphs that we've extended. We use symbolic reasoning. We use language models, and we use neural networks. And they all come together in a kind of a composite fashion to deliver this tremendous capability. And you know, neural networks, which are a type of machine learning that leverages data, right? We talked about neural before. We talked about symbolic AI, this ability to represent knowledge rather than start with data. We can mash these together, and we have this other new term I referred to earlier on, neuro-symbolic AI. Now, frustratingly, this is beyond the scope of what I have time to talk about today. The good news is my co-founder and very good friend, AI scientist Ben Taylor, is going to be talking a bit more about symbolic AI at this event. So look out for that, or come and see us on the Rainbird stand, and we'll talk to you more about it. But this is very much the future of solving these historical battles that we've had with AI around explainability and trust. Because the irony is, right, that the Achilles heel of machine learning, the challenge of data availability, bias, and explainability, is resolved by symbolic AI. And that actually symbolic AI had a challenge, which is its narrowness. You can only build tools that know what you tell them. That has now been opened up. It used to be called the closed world problem, or the closed world assumption. That's now been opened up and is solved by machine learning. Large language models, whilst they're great to play with ChatGPT, were the last piece of the jigsaw that enables us to have the best of everything we've ever wanted. And that's why 10 years into Rainbird's journey, we made this bet 10 years ago. We started investigating LLMs 4 or 5 years ago. This is why we're here, because AI, you know, the world needs AI it can trust if we're going to solve some of our biggest challenges. So look, I'm coming towards the end of my talk. Just a couple of points. A Deloitte report last year showed that actually nearly all business leaders agree that AI is critical, not important, not kind of if we want to, critical for success. And that's got to be right, hasn't it? And actually, it's people that are AI informed, the leadership that understand this stuff properly, that are going to set the most effective organizations apart from the competition in the future. And that's definitely some of you folk that are here. I spoke to a leading industry analyst just a month ago who told me 40% of all inquiries from enterprises are now asking one question: how can we govern large language models? So governance is clearly on everybody's mind. Now, I may be the only voice, maybe today, maybe during this whole great event, that's urging caution about this particular challenge with generative AI and ChatGPT. They are amazing. Honestly, we love ChatGPT. It's amazing in terms of innovation. And you know what? Time feels like it's of the essence. It's very fast-paced nature of this technology. It puts pressure on it, even demands that we move quickly to take advantage of it. But if you remember just one thing from this talk, it's that predictions are not the same as judgment. And if you need trust if you're going to have people adopt your technology. So what's my suggestion? My suggestion is to get building, right? I suggest taking a lighthouse approach. It's a common pattern of innovation. Create something that can be a lighthouse within your organization. Maybe a human digital twin that enables others to tap into a source of digitized knowledge to increase productivity, great, but also just to create some enthusiasm, to educate, and most importantly, to test all of this before scaling to customer-facing applications. Also, showcasing this to others in your organization, how this will affect the operating model and impact that this is going to have on people. Because you've got to be very clear on your ethics, transparency, trust, fairness, accountability, governance. And hopefully, if you create a lighthouse or two that live those values and have those baked in, you'll carry your workforce with you. This also caught my eye from PwC. 1/3 of executives say that over the next year, they plan to run 4 trust-building processes, improve the governance of AI systems and processes, confirm AI-driven decisions are interpretable and easily explainable, right? Monitor and report on model performance, and protect AI systems from cyber threats and manipulations. Now, I'm biased, right? But I would say number 2 is a prerequisite of the others. And we've got, AI legislation coming in pretty much every country, right? This stuff is getting regulated. Transparency, traceability, trust is part of that agenda. Now, because generative AI poses a variety of risks, too many to talk about, but ones you might want to consider today, many of these can be mitigated by focusing on explainability, right? So look, as you know, for now, regulation, as I just indicated, is coming, but it remains a bit hazy, right? While there are laws being whipped up around the world about how we should ethically and responsibly use them, there are still relatively few guardrails. So be aware of these risks, okay? Because it's resting on business leaders in AI to make sure that this is being used responsibly. Listen, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to come and speak to you. I appreciate all of your patience. We're around to answer questions. Please feel free to connect. Come and see us on the stand. To look after yourself. Enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you very much.